Perfect Specimen, episode 3. We made it. We made it.
We made it. Cheers, brother.
So I need to issue an apology based off last week's video. I got the Arnold lifting numbers incorrect, and a lot of people were upset about that.
Very upset.
They took it as a personal insult, and for that, I'm sorry that you're so emotional and sensitive. That was one of our best videos. We're a little short.
Yeah.
Hey, whatever. I also got a bone to pick with you.
Okay, please.
You're sitting there all like short shirt, flex, like ripped out of your mind. I'm sitting here like a slob when I'm editing, just like hunched over.
Oh, I told you there's a new product we can get you.
The gut strap.
The gut strap. Suck it in.
So Josh sends me this thing, this big stomach wrap, just to wrap my gut in with. Did not appreciate that.
Oh, I did. I enjoyed it.
I saw something else the other day. It was these knee straps, like knee braces, but they straighten your leg out for you.
Oh,
So it's like if you're hiking or something, it basically like spring loads. So when you bend, it just like springs it open and like forces your knees open.
Wow.
I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Well, people use something similar to that on to ski. And I think it's the brand's like Stoko or something. And it's basically, have you seen the BOA system for like snowboard boots and stuff? They have that. It's like tights that you put on. And then as you cinch it, there's kind of this cable system that's built around your knee. And then it tightens it up. And it gives this like spring tension to your knee joint, right? Yeah. I know people seem to like it that have knee issues.
I guess. I don't know. Work on your knee issues.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. What'd you get up to this week? Anything crazy?
Nothing too crazy. Ski patrol is. We had a jiu-jitsu session at your gym. Yeah, that was a good time.
Yeah, you haven't been at it in a while, eh? How was that?
I was so sore. Like, it's all those small muscles that you don't use. Like the next day, my neck.
Oh, the neck is.
Oh my god. Yeah. My neck
Turning
was unbelievable, man. So sore.
Yeah.
It was fun. It's fun to be back on the mat when you have some time off. It's
addicting. You're like, I want to go back. I want to do this, and then you feel it after, and you're like, holy shit, I'm sore.
Yeah,
I need a break.
Yeah. It's very addicting though. Like instantly, you kind of get in this mode of like, let's go.
Yeah,
right.
It is fun.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I went this week, and the professor, he brought out some other guys from the other gym because it's like the affiliate, and there's 2 brown belts and a purple, I think, and the other guys were there as well. And they just destroyed me, like just fed me my dinner after like time after time. It was the one guy was so good at, he'd be like going for a choke or something like that. And then all of a sudden you just feel your arm go out to the side and you'd just be like, like dangling the keys over here or just like taking your lunch over there.
You need those resets once in a while where, you might be used to just, like you're rolling with a bunch of white belts and you're actually dominating them.
Oh, yeah.
And every once in a while, a purple belt comes and shows you who's boss. You're like, okay, all right.
And it was repetitive. Like it was just time after time. Because I was doing no-gi stuff too. Yeah. So even worse. Like there's nowhere to hide. There's just. Yeah. But it was fun. Do
you like no-gi or gi better?
I don't know. What I like about no-gi is I'm not very good at, and maybe this is just my experience and it probably is, with the gi is like using the collars and all that stuff, like getting the grips and all that. Like I'm not familiar with that. So for me, it's more natural to like go for a wrist to pin or like, just that straight body contact. Yeah. So I don't know. I like them both. And I'm trying to like, the way my gym works is Wednesdays are gi, and Tuesday, Thursdays are no gi. So I'm trying to kind of hop between and do both. I like them both. I don't know. I prefer the no-gi, but I'll do both.
You'll do both. And they both have their place, and I think training both is important.
Yeah. Did you do much no-gi stuff, or were you
both? Yeah. I really liked the gi though. I found it. Yeah. The pacing was nice. It's a little bit slower.
Oh, it is for sure.
If you need a break, you have things to grab onto. Some guys are slippery, they all get all sweaty at the end of your session, and you're just like, the pace can ramp up, and nothing to grab.
And It was like I went from starting with the black belt to like both the brown belts to like the
Yeah.
purple belt, and it was
Yeah.
just I was so bagged by the end of it. Just like
Yeah.
they're like, you need to breathe. I'm like, you need to get off my chest.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally.
So
Yeah.
that was fun though.
Yeah. That's a good time. How's your week?
It was good. That was mostly it. Just hung out with the kids and that family stuff.
Nice.
So, yeah. And Jen went up to Canmore, my wife. She's doing the Sinister, what the heck's it called? There's in Crow's Nest Pass, Sinister something Ultramarathon. Okay. She's doing that with a group. Pretty cool race.
They each have sections.
Yeah. So it's like a partnered competition, and they have probably what's hers? I think it's like 30K, maybe 25, 30K, something like that. She has to do pretty crazy elevations within there. Mm-hmm. But she's getting into kind of the ultra, not really ultra scene, but just like getting her feet wet. I'm sure it's going to start the addiction, kind of like jiu-jitsu where you try it and you're like, oh, I'm full in. I need all the gear, everything like that. So she went out with her old captain to Canmore and did a couple loops up there. So
yeah, all trail stuff. Yeah. Have you played around with trail running versus pavement running?
A little bit. I like the trail stuff just because it's that scenery and that release, where if you're just road running, it's pretty boring, monotonous, right? And it's good for consistent pace, and just like consistency on footing and all that stuff. But I think trail running just provides that variety and almost that, I wouldn't say interval training, but just that constantly varied kind of fluctuation in what you're doing, right?
I think a part of it is like also the mental stimulation.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're just doing a pavement race, man, that's so boring.
Yeah.
But when you're working around routes and the terrain is varied up and down, just gives you something to think about.
Yeah, and when bear's chasing you, you just gotta
go. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Nice. Have you ever heard of the Tillo swim run?
No.
So it's this race. I heard about it on Rich Roll's podcast, and it started, I think, in Sweden. So here's what it is. It's so it is 69 kilometers, and it has 24 run sections and 23 swim sections.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
you're going back and forth between the two.
Yeah. And so it's the reason that they kind of started is because they have this very cool island section. Like basically you swim from here, like swim 1K, and you get to this island, you hop over this island, traverse this island, then you go back into the swim, and you just constantly go from swim to run to swim to run. And it's a partner competition.
Whoa.
And you're tethered to your partner.
No way.
Yeah. So they've kind of gotten relaxed with the tethering a bit, but if you get too far ahead of your partner in the swim, they'll force you to tether back together. And usually people will tether in the water just so they don't get too far apart. I don't know if you need to tether on land, but it's some pretty cool pictures. I'll put them up on the video version of this. And guys just like dragging their partners out of the water because it's so slippery. And so you can use hand paddles for it too, which is cool
crazy for the swim.
Yeah. Which I was like, I'm down for that. Like I could do that.
Yeah.
So there's one in Whistler. If you're interested, it's going to be, what is it here? 32K run and 4.7 mile swim, but it's broken up.
Yeah. It's broken up.
And we get hand paddles.
Yay. I think this is quite reasonable.
Yeah. I think we could. We'll have to figure out
here's my biggest question.
Yeah.
Is footwear. Like what are they using for footwear?
I don't know.
Are they swimming with shoes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why, I think that's why they let you use the hand paddles, because it's so awkward, probably kicking.
100%.
And to save your legs, so you're not just constantly kicking on, like running and kicking.
Yeah.
So it's that back and forth.
So I have a funny story actually about having the wrong footwear for an event.
Yeah.
So I did a Spartan race. I think like this past summer, first time I've ever done kind of one of those tough mudder Spartan race things. It was out in Red Deer, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna use these like sweet Vivo barefoot shoes, and they're pretty good. They got like all this like tread on the bottom. Well, the shoes I got are 100% waterproof, and so what that means is that when you go into water you're underwater, it fills with water and then doesn't drain. So the first event where I had to go like under this thing, and I come out and all of a sudden I'm like running and like clunk, clunk, clunk. My feet are just like 2 bricks. And I'm in the middle of the race and like everyone's kind of going. And I'm like, okay, I got to drain this. So I proceeded to, in the middle of the race, lay on my back with my feet up, and I just started kicking my legs on my back in the middle of the race to drain this water out.
It's like when you're a kid and you have rain boots on, you
100%. 100%. I'm like, do I take them off or do I just put them up above my head? So that was a big experience. If you're doing anything water and run related, you need boots that can drain. It's very important.
And I think so. They did. I think they list the Vivo ones on there, but I do think these ones have the vents in them, and like the meshy ones.
Oh yeah, Vivo makes a bunch of good shoes for that stuff. Not these ones. Yeah,
and they like it's interesting because they make you get health insurance. They make you get like all this gear and stuff like that for it. So yeah,
out in Whistler.
Yeah.
I've
They have a bunch of cool ones. They have one, I think, in Austin and kind of all over the world.
Nice.
So we'll have to look at
We
some.
could have fun with that. Yeah.
Dabble.
Yeah.
To get in our swimming.
Yeah.
Shape.
Yeah. It's swim shape. We've talked about that in a previous podcast, but it's very, very real swim shape. It's like you have to put some time in.
Yeah. You can't just jump in there and expect to do well because it's going to humble you real quick.
Well, that's good, though. We'll put some time in. That'd be a fun one to do.
All right. We'll look up one. We'll get one going. Maybe we can video it. So this past week, Nobull merged with TB12. Do you know much about TB12 at all?
Other than it's Tom Brady's brand or something? Yeah.
So I think it's like, and I know minimal about it too. I just know that it's like a health and wellness kind of brand. So I think Matt Fraser used him as a physiotherapist, or they have like a physiotherapy group kind of thing. Like it's this big, I think, umbrella for a bunch
top
of
level
different
athletes.
Yeah, for just a bunch of different health and wellness kind of things. I think they do workout stuff as well, and it's the here I'll read you the Forbes one because it's kind of interesting. So you know that the Body Armor, the company Body Armor, you see a bunch of the sports drinks now. So the main owner of that, he's now the main owner of Nobull. Tom Brady is the second biggest shareholder.
Right.
And they're still going to keep the Nobull name.
Yeah.
And basically, I think what they want to do is take on like Lululemon and Nike and try to expand kind of into that because the guy has the sports drink stuff, right?
Right.
He's a billionaire, so he has kind of the net worth to just push it and try to get all the influencers on it and make it mainstream.
The marketing.
I think Nobull's issue is it was too CrossFit specific.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it was limited. Like they were in the NFL Combine too.
Oh, were they? Yeah,
they were doing that. So they're trying to kind of burst out of that.
Yeah.
Like the little shell they were in.
But I bet you non-CrossFitters, like most people they don't know what Nobull is.
No, nobody has an idea.
In that CrossFit space.
Yeah. Like it's a pretty niche brand, right? Yeah. And I think that's why Reebok kind of shed the CrossFit, probably because of the legalities around it, but also to make them more like a well-versed brand.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And then we had GoRuck is the new sponsor for CrossFit.
Yeah. I don't know much about other than like the Ruck backs. I know they have shoes and stuff like that as well, but curious to see.
It's cool. It's neat having these American companies partner with a big brand like that for us Canadians. Yeah. Because I find it gives us a bit more access to their products. Yeah. They figure out the whole logistics of shipping and the rates for us here. Yeah. I know. Forgotten society across the border.
I hate it so much because you go on the internet, you're like, oh, I'm going to buy some shoes, $120. Oh, it's American. Okay, so whatever that is, $170 now, plus shipping, plus duty. It's like $220.
Didn't we like price something out once, like overnight oats or something like that, and price it all out? I'm like, this is like so unattainable for us. Like $10
$10 a
breakfast for.
I know we're the bastard children up here.
Yes, we are. 1,000%. Yeah.
It's painful. There's so much good stuff down there. Oh, so yeah, for you. So I was cruising Reddit this morning, and the most amazing thing popped up. I'll show it to you. Now, for the video listeners, or what? For the video people, I'll put it up there. For the audio listeners, somebody competed as a Canadian guy in a BJJ competition in a Speedo.
He did not wear that.
Yeah. So it looks like he's like fresh off the pool deck. And I was like, no, maybe he was just like a spectator or something. Like, no, like he
actually competed.
Yeah, so there's a picture of him and like on the sidelines in a Speedo. Now he's lined up against this guy in a Speedo. I was like, okay.
Wow.
This next picture though is just amazing.
No.
So the guy is in full mount on this poor guy, like
like
package
full,
just
like
right in his
teabagging
face.
him right there.
This poor soul.
No way.
Oh,
I can't believe they let that go. I mean, I guess where's the line between spandex shorts and a Speedo? But I think there's a line that can be drawn.
A line as well. I think there needs to be some kind of inseam in there.
Yes.
You know, like
Yeah. Yeah, I fully agree. That's not right.
I was dying when I saw that this morning.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny. It's like that video of this kid that's wrestling, and the kid on top is on top, and you just see his junk like smearing on the guy's cheek.
The poor guy and the mom in the stands, like, good job, Connor. Keep going, Connor. You're doing great.
Trying to bridge off his back.
Yeah.
Like,
Just
that kid's never gonna wrestle
Yeah.
again after that. He's just mortified for the rest of his life, you know.
Come on, Toby, get this. Take it, Toby.
That video will live on the internet forever.
It is funny, I find, with people that do jujitsu or wrestling and versus people that have never done that sort of sport before.
Yeah.
You get very comfortable touching other people's bodies very quickly. You get very accustomed to that. Like at the hall sometimes, you'll be like, oh, hey, I want to try out this move here. So just like come into my guard real quick and
Jiu-jitsu move.
Jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu
Yeah.
move. But and then it's like, oh yeah, Ralph's there. Oh yeah, sure, I'll jump in or whatever.
Yeah.
But most people are not comfortable with that. Like if you just ask someone to lay on the ground and you just full mounted them, like they'd be so weirded out by that, right?
Yeah, it is a weird.
Yeah.
It is a good thing though. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a line, but that being comfortable with that and comfortable in like close proximity to someone, you know, the people are just like, oh, get away from me, like you're too close. I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
It is kind of funny, like going through COVID, how like scared people were of like how
yeah.
you mentioned this, like you came out of jiu-jitsu just rolling against some dude, and it's like 6 feet away, get 6 feet away.
It was wild. Like literally going from a jiu-jitsu class, and you'd be like hard breathing in a room packed full of people, like literally sweat drips from some dude, like hits your lips. You're like, it's like people will be mortified, and then you go from that into a grocery store. You know, and everyone had masks on, and there's like lines on the aisles, and everyone's 6 feet apart. And I'm like, man, like in contrast to what I was just doing 10 minutes ago, this is really weird.
If they only knew.
If they only knew, yeah. Some grandma would be passing out, yeah.
What are your thoughts on powerlifting? I have this theory that everybody in their life should do a powerlifting cycle. And the reason for that is I think you will get an insane amount of strength out of it. You will get fat probably, like I did, continue to be. But I think, have you done a powerlifting cycle?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I fully agree with the first half. Well, pretty much everything you said, but I do think there's some caveats to it. So you're right. I gained a ton of strength. I think I instantly put 50 pounds on my deadlift and 50 pounds on my squat. My bench didn't go up by a ton. I think bench is kind of a unique thing where you actually have to put a lot of attention to it. But for sure, my squat, my deadlift, it was like 50 pounds like that in like 6 weeks. I think I did Johnny Candido's 6-week cycle at the time. But then I went to do a second cycle of it. And by the time I was done that, everything else was suffering in such a tremendous way. I remember I gained, like I was up to like 200 pounds and I was getting a bit of a belly and I went to do a pull-up, and pull-ups were like so hard, and I went to do burpees and my cardio was tanking, and I did it in this very like, I'm going to not do anything else but powerlifting. I'm going to focus on just getting stronger and nothing else. And I was just eating a ton of food. And to an extreme way. Like I was working at the time, I was at the keg. I was younger, right? And I remember drinking. I would just be hammering whole milk like all the time. I'd get off work, I'd have a steak, full dinner, I'd have dessert after. It was just eating everything I could. And again, my strength numbers were shooting up. My weight was shooting up. But I felt like a bag of shit. Like I couldn't move. It wasn't a good feeling. I didn't feel healthy. My guts didn't feel good. I felt like I was a bit inflamed. So yes, I do think there's a ton of value to doing a powerlifting cycle. And I think probably doing a cycle right? If you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, it's probably good. But after that, you need to think about the well-rounded nature of your life, and then find something that is probably more balanced, right? And I think maybe even a more optimal way would be to do a powerlifting cycle, but still throw in some monostructural cardio, some stuff that will support your aerobic system. And I think you can eat in a surplus, right, to gain muscle, but I don't necessarily think you need to be totally off the wagon where you're gaining too much excess weight. It's kind of a balancing act.
Yeah. Do you think if you through that cycle would have done like ruck walk once or twice a week, do you think that would have changed things kind of for you?
It probably would have. I mean, I really didn't do that stuff, so I think it might have played in for sure. Just not dropping your...
It's a tough balance, right? Like you're kind of fully committing to one, but are you? Like it's when I was doing the Olympic lifting stuff too, I was still trying to do some cardio stuff. And you could tell it would affect you. Like my hips were tight from running, so I couldn't hit full depth in a snatch, right? So you really have to thread the line, and it's a delicate balance of how deep am I going in one or the other. And if you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to take these 6 weeks and dedicate to that, I know I'm going to hurt this stuff, but then I can maintain that easier and then kind of get back my cardio systems after that.
Have you ever done like a full powerlifting cycle or just?
So I did one through hybrid.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Like same thing, like numbers shoot up, all that. But you gain weight. Like I gained probably 10, 15 pounds. And everything else suffers. I only did one, which was good. And then I kind of went right back. Because I realized it pretty quick. Like I can maintain strength really easily. Yes. I cannot maintain my cardiovascular system that easily. Like my engine just goes straight down.
So you didn't want to deviate too far.
No. And I noticed it. Because I do some CrossFit workouts with Janet or whatever and run. And it was noticeable how terrible I was. And I'm like, okay, we're shutting her down after this. Right? Yeah. And you do feel that like inflammation in the joints and stuff. And it's like, my body can only handle so much of this. So maybe let's shut it down.
Yeah. I think a 6-week cycle is the sweet spot, and hit it and move on, or probably even better, have some progressive overload just built into your well-rounded training. And you might not have the immediate gains that you'd have if you'd had a dedicated cycle, but your longevity is probably there more so.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's important to play around with programming. Like I'm program hop like crazy, but I think have a goal in mind, work towards that goal, and then pivot, right? Like what was that podcast you sent me with Chris Williamson and the other guy? It's like either push or pivot, right? Like either you're going to hit that resistance and make the realization like, okay, I can finish this cycle. Or I realize my body's slowly breaking down. I'm not liking the way it's going. So let's pivot. Let's go somewhere else and work off that. And there's no shame in that.
No, there's not. And I think that like exposure to multiple things is going to make you better. Right? If you always stick with the same thing and you've never tried something else, like you learn a lot from trying something, even if you don't see it all the way through because you've realized it's not for you. You'll still learn why it wasn't for you. And that's valuable. And
you hit those plateaus too, right? And it's if you only ever do the same programming time after time, like eventually you're going to plateau. There needs to be that variety in your training, I think, for optimal growth.
And you have to have fun with it.
You have to enjoy it.
You can't be bored to death and dread your training every time.
That's true.
So I've been toying with an idea, and I think to a certain extent, all people are creative to some extent, but how they express their creativity is going to vary drastically. And some people find outlets and some people don't find outlets. You have some people that become amazing painters or amazing musicians. And then some people might express their creativity in the gym or through physical endeavors, maybe running. Myself, I ski a ton, and I genuinely feel that when I'm on the mountain skiing, like that's my outlet. When you have an open face to the mountain and you can move your body and flow and choose where you want to take your body, it is a creative endeavor. But people don't often think about something like that as a creative endeavor. They would say, well, you have to be, performing something or creating something in order for it to be creative, right? I guess by
they'd call it like an athletic endeavor rather than creative, right?
Yeah, exactly. An athletic endeavor over a creative endeavor. But from the experience of the individual doing that thing. So if you kind of flip it from an inside view looking out, right? What are the differences of what you're really experiencing, right? You're flowing in a certain state when you're painting, and I would argue that you're flowing in a certain state when you're skiing. And I'm sure, you could relate it to surfing. You get in this really creative mode where everything else kind of fades out and you're tapping into some sort of pleasure state where you're just existing, moving, and it's almost like a release of tension in that you can have the buildup of your life, and you can have anxieties, and you can have all these things that feel like they're kind of pent up inside you, and when you go and you have that outlet, everything sort of settles down and you almost have a state of clarity afterward. And I feel like everyone needs that to some extent, but people find it in different ways. So I wanted to bring that up with you and get your thoughts on it, and get your thoughts onto what you use for your creative outlets. And
it's interesting because what you're kind of talking about is flow state, but it's not. It's almost like the release of endorphins in that pleasure state of just like, that euphoria of being in the moment and the realization of like the act. And I've had that many times. One of the coolest ones was in like there's memorable. I've tried to surf quite a bit. I'm landlocked, so I'm pretty limited. But I have certain core memories of like amazing waves. Like there's 3 or 4 ones that just are stuck in my mind of like how good it felt, and just the experience was so cool. And I think it's important to find those outlets in your life, and it can be so broad and varied of what you're doing, right? Like the creative outlet that you choose is so much different than mine, right? And the creative outlets that I choose are like I enjoy snowboarding and doing that, but for me, water is like amazing. I also like creating, like with this podcast, like editing, video editing, and like just the art side of it.
Yeah.
Whereas my dad's super artistic. Like he was in art college, airbrush, very creative.
Yeah.
And it's cool because I'm seeing like aspects of that in Margot, and like how much she loves to draw and how like much pleasure that gives her. Whereas I'm not really for that. And that for me, it's more creating in like the virtual side of things, and the filmmaking and all that kind of thing is such a cool endeavor. And when you get in that flow state, we'll just call it, it's just everything clicks and everything just moves together. And I love that feeling. Like I've been lately playing, like I play a lot of video games, but I've been trying not to. And I find so much pleasure after when I don't, and I do something more creative, and like that feeling of accomplishment. Right.
Yeah. And it almost seems like with something like, say, painting, for instance, you can, start just freelancing and almost tapping into something that it may not be objectively beautiful, but from an individual standpoint, you can almost like express instant creativity to a certain extent. But as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about how from a sport like skiing or surfing, I don't think you can instantly tap into that same outlet because it requires so much skill, where I feel like you're too focused on the actual technique of what you're doing to be in any sort of state of just flow. Like when I was learning how to surf, for instance, I can't relate to that experience of just being on a wave floating, because everything about me was just like balance. How do I get? I'm surviving, right? And I see people on ski hills all the time where I can tell that there's nothing creative about what they're doing. They're just sitting there surviving. I think the creativity starts in these physical endeavors when you're no longer having to like think about the technique of what you're doing necessarily, but more just the experience of what you're doing. Like you're looking at where you want to go and you're going there, and your body's moving without you having to tell your left leg to go there and your right leg to go there. It's already there. Like you're past that. And not to say that you cease to bring attention to technique and to improve, but it's just that your ability to let that stuff go in the moment and just enjoy the pure experience of it, that takes a lot of time to get to that point when it comes to physical endeavors, as opposed to, I think, and maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there's a buildup with something like art too, but it almost seems like
I think I think it's similar in art. I think what you're getting at is that when it goes from being a conscious decision to unconscious, right? Like
yes,
that,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
that transition where in art, like if you're creating, all of a sudden it just flows. Like
Mm-hmm.
you probably have to put in X amount of hours to get to that point, right? In like filmmaking or videography, like it's a certain point where it's like, yes, this is just natural and it's happening. I don't have to think about like the exposure, the aperture, like all these different things, like the lighting, the angle. It's just like, it's there. I know it because it's just like, it's part of my body now. It's
So really, there is
repetition.
no difference between the two then?
I don't think so. I think the repetitions and like that familiarity and that comfort, where I think it's that transition from that conscious to unconscious, where your body it's just natural, right? It just happens. I think that's when you kind of get that flow state and that creativity.
I'd almost then say that there's probably some people that never get to experience that because they never push something long enough to ever attain that state. But for those people that have attained that state, I've never attained that state doing art, but I promise you have attained that skiing, right?
Yeah.
So, but that when you're in that state, it's there's almost nothing better. Like I feel like my soul craves it. Every ounce of me craves it. It's what keeps me just addicted to being out in the mountains and going. And it almost seems like it's necessary to some extent for my sanity.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't help then but say, to what extent is creativity necessary for people? Like it seems to be present in everything, right?
I think for pleasure and happiness, I think creativity is huge, right? If you're just existing, then you're not growing, right? Like that, I think it's that growth and that expression of yourself, which is creativity, like that expression of yourself. I think that is like the ultimate in what humans kind of need, right? And there's so many different, I think, definitions of it or examples of it, but yeah, if you were just, you just lived in a basement, did the same thing day after day, right? Like go to work, come home, watch Netflix, repeat, right?
Yeah.
Where's the creativity in that? Like,
Yeah.
unless you're accomplishing that at work, but you probably aren't. But I think
That
everybody
is some
has,
people's life though. Like it's a very real existence for some people. Right?
Yeah, and it's some people need that. Some people need that consistency, and I think maybe whether they're doing like little projects and stuff, but yeah, it goes back to like you need those little hobbies and these little outlets and creativity to bring that happiness into your life. Because if you didn't, it would be miserable.
So do you think, so I had a fun conversation on the phone with a buddy the other day. Do you think people are becoming less creative over time with like the consumption of being able to watch things, and then you have AI that is now like maybe taking the place of creativity? If I have to do a project, instead of writing and letting my creative juices flow, I can just prompt it and spit something out that is creative, but it wasn't me. It was something else creating it. Like, are we moving in a direction of people experiencing less creativity?
I think it's a natural evolution, right? Like what was creative 100 years ago, they might look at what we are now and they're like, what is this? It's ridiculous. Like they're on boards or on whatever, like they're driving and like all this ridiculousness. But I think it's this constant evolution. I think AI is based off past experiences, right? It's not, you can't predict future experiences. Like it's going to try its best based off the past. But I think one thing that AI will enable us to do is, and something like social media enables us to do, is, for example, Tony Hawk's 900, right? Before he did the 900 was impossible.
Right.
As soon as he did the 900, other people are going to do it.
Yeah.
Other people did it.
Right.
So with social media and this constant sharing of experience, people now realize what is possible. What someone on the other side of the world did, I can do that, right? Like the impossible is not possible because that happened, and because it's shared and there's a more steady flow of information. It promotes that growth.
And as people tap into that information, it's adding to their ability to now create new stuff.
Yeah. And as AI progresses, it takes stuff off our plate that would have limited us, and now we can focus on something else. So say like that project, so if someone's going to make AI write an essay, well, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but if that takes that off their plate, then maybe they're allowing themselves to explore creativity in another area, and they get more time for that, right? So it's the shuffling of priorities and the shuffling of those experiences, if that makes sense.
I like that. Yeah, I think that's a unique perspective, because I think a lot of people would have said something different, and they would have been like, no, it's thinking for you, it's making people less creative. But I think that that's a very good observation, and I hadn't really thought about it in that way.
It's kind of like, I relate it to, if you say you spend 3 hours a week cutting your grass, now you pay someone to cut your grass.
Yeah.
What does that 3 hours now enable you to
what
do?
can that become?
What can you do with that, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think areas that, I don't know. I think in areas that are mundane and just
monotonous,
like AI will kind of trump that and take that off our plate, hopefully. And now it'll allow people to explore and do new cool shit, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to give people the opportunity to fill that space, but it's an opportunity to fill that space with something creative. It's not saying that necessarily all people will fill that space with something creative.
And I think those people naturally, like, if they were lazy, they're going to continue to be lazy. Yeah. But if you hear all these high performing people, the CEOs and the millionaire this and that, they're like, yeah, X amount of times, X amount of dollars, right? Like, it's a similar thing for us peasants, right? Like, if you can take something off your plate, it gives you room somewhere else, right?
Have you seen all the videos coming out of people wearing the Apple Vision Pro goggles?
No.
Because Apple just came out with these virtual reality goggles, right? And people are wearing them like on the subway, walking down the street. There's one video of someone like in his Tesla driving, and he's like clearly typing on some virtual keyboard, like in his car driving on the freeway with his goggles on. It's obscene, man. It's so crazy watching all these videos. People just living in this augmented reality. Like, it's so strange.
It is strange. I'm curious how far it goes. And like, it's going to be a contact lens at some point, right? Where you're not even going to know someo's watching Netflix right behind your head, right?
Yeah.
And it's a weird.
Yeah, you just think he's just daydreaming, looks spaced off. Totally.
Yeah. That kind of leads into something else I want to talk about was, have you ever read a book and then visited it 5-10 years later, and then you get something else out of it?
I don't think I've ever reread a book in that way. I've rewatched movies, and I've definitely had that happen with movies, where I've watched a movie later in life and been like, oh, this is a completely different movie than when I watched it the first time years back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that, like, I'm reading through Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck again.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, like, the mindset you're in and the path that you're on, how different it is and how much different stuff you take out of it. Like, I take notes in my books usually, and so I'll write them in the front cover. Just even the stuff I wrote there, I was like, oh, why would I highlight that? And it's like, oh, because of this experience at this time and this blah, 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 blah. And I would encourage people to go back. If you had a meaningful book in your life, go back and read it again. And I've read have you read The Alchemist?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's
Great
a good one.
book.
I try to read it every couple of years, because you take little things out of each time, right? Where you are in your life, and
Yeah, that's interesting. You can't really replicate getting older.
Yeah.
Like, it's just you almost look back and you can't believe that where your mind state was, even 5 years ago, right? It's like, but I don't think that ever stops. I think if you keep having a growth mindset, every 5 years you'll look back and think, wow, like I've grown a tremendous amount. You really are a malleable person, and you continue to have those leaps throughout your life.
Well, it's like the experiences that you had leading up to that point kind of dictate where you are in that life, right? I was listening to another podcast today while I was on the bike, and the guy was talking about how if you have twins, it's no matter how similar they are, it's those experiences that will kind of dictate where you are and where you're going. And it's like the nurture versus nature thing, but like ultimately people experience different things differently. And I was curious because he's like, I wonder how, if two twins, identical, had the exact same experiences, maybe like you separate them, had the exact same experiences and the exact same like chances to respond, would they do the exact same thing, or would it be different? You know what I mean? Like, if they're the same person and it's the same experiences, and you have 1,000 different decisions you can make on one thing, what you do, what will you choose? Will you choose the same thing? It's kind of an interesting...
It's an interesting thought experiment, and it's I think that in a way it's kind of like the whole, do we have free will or do not have free will, right? Like is every decision you make just a series of every decision you've ever made playing into helping to guide your current decision?
Yeah.
You know, and I think if you take that mindset, it can kind of take a lot of, well, there's two ways to look at it, right? You say you take someone that, you know, committed a crime and they're in prison. You can take a bit of a sympathetic approach to them, not saying that you can let them be in society and be okay with their decisions, but you can say they didn't have a choice to make a different decision because they didn't get to choose their shithead parents. They didn't get to choose the fact that their friend got them hooked on drugs when they were a young kid, that their mentors were stealing and this and that. They didn't choose all that. And every single experience that they ever had eventually led them to whatever, robbing a convenience store, hit and running, whatever it is. And so you can take that sympathetic approach. But then some people say, well, then what, does anything matter? And it's like, well, no, it probably does matter. Because if everything is built upon your previous experiences, then doing the right thing matters almost more than anything. Like I need to choose to not lie. I need to choose to always do the right thing, because if I lie now, it's probably going to be easier for me to lie in the future if everything is built upon your previous experiences. So it does matter. Do the right thing.
Well, it's like it just puts the weight in different buckets. I think of like you have the decision to do a good thing or a bad thing, and it's like either you're stacked up here in the good thing or you're stacked up here in the bad thing. But ultimately, you have the decision to do both. It's what it's going to push you in, right?
Yeah. Well, momentum, right? Anything. It's probably momentum is very real in any project, in anything you do in your life.
Yeah.
It's a series of decisions that keep you moving forward, right? It's like habit building. It's hard to build a habit unless you do it over and over again for an extended period of time, where that momentum just takes over at a certain point and then it's part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Tell me about your snow patrol experience. You're telling me at work. You were kind of mentioning to the guys at work over here. Let's go through it.
It was a gong show. So at the hill I'm at, we have this big area that we just added on to the mountain a couple of years ago. And it's a ton of new terrain in there. And when you add on a big chunk of terrain that didn't used to be part of the mountain, it takes a few years to get all the runs defined, to get all the shrubs kind of cleared out and the trees taken down. And so you have these defined runs where when you go in this area, you kind of know that if you keep following it down, you're eventually going to, it'll all funnel out in the right direction. And it's not going to be, you're not going to run into just a bunch of bushes, right?
Yeah.
So on ski patrol, at the end of the day, we have to close that part of the mountain off early. The last run on last chairlift closes at 4, but we've got to start closing some terrain at 3:00, just so we can start getting the people that are already in that terrain off the mountain and then give us time to go in and sweep it. So I was responsible for closing all of the gates to the new terrain, and then afterward going in and sweeping part of it. I'm not familiar with this terrain that much. It's a large, it is a massive part of the mountain, and I just haven't been in there very much. It usually doesn't open until halfway through the season due to the snow, and then it's only been here for a couple of seasons. So anyway, so I go in there thinking I've got this, right? I kind of look on a map and see where I got to sweep, and I very quickly realized that this is so confusing, right? I end up partway down, sort of like there's a split where you can go right, and it kind of goes down, basically a little tree bluff, but downhill. And then I've gone left on that same path. I realized when I went right, I went down probably like 20 feet, and then I brought up my maps, and luckily I had like one bar, and I was able to connect to my topo map, and I'm like, no, I should be over on the other side of this trees here. But I had to walk back like 20 feet uphill. I'm like, hey, no big deal. So I popped my ski off and I took one step because I thought kind of looked like it was a bit firm. And I went like through the snow up to my hip. And I'm supposed to be doing this sweep quick. Like I'm supposed to be just blasting through this, getting to the bottom, getting the lifts back up to the summit in order to continue on with my backside sweeps. So I'm like, okay, I got to put my skis back on. Put my ski back on, and I have proceeded to do kind of like a side step and shuffle all the way back up. And at this point, I'm absolutely drenched in sweat. Like I'm just pouring, man. goggles are fogged up. My goggles are here. I'm just dripping. And I'm just thinking in my head, like, if anyone was watching what was happening, just watching a professional patroller just sidestepping professional patroller. So I eventually get up and around these trees, and I realize, okay, I'm in the right area. Check my map. I'm going. And it just keeps getting from, like, bad to worse. Like, all of a sudden, I pop out on this, like, big cliff band, and I'm, like, having to hop my skis down cliffs, and then eventually I end up, and I'm just bushwhacking. Like, I'm on a ski resort in this new area in the bushes. Like, I'm literally bushwhacking through trees like, it was absolutely horrible. I got to the bottom of it. I got to the point where I knew I wasn't going to make it back up to the top. Yeah. So I had to radio and basically say, don't count on me for backside sweep, because I'm still making my way down. Eventually I got to the bottom and got out, and I'll tell you, Derek, I was drenched. Like, I could wring my shirt out. The guys are just laughing.
Yeah.
And it was when you're patrolling, if you don't know an area, it can be pretty daunting. On a ski hill. I learned my lesson.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
I was like, this is just awful. Yeah.
I have like a affinity when I'm out there for just hunting powder in like the worst spots ever.
Yeah.
And on a snowboard, it's so much worse because I can't you got to take your shit off and walk, right? Uh-huh. And I will always like skirt out of bounds and going like, yeah, look how sick this looks, and just end up in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And then walk after, just like.
Well, that's the thing. When you're at a new hill, and people, it's not like fresh powder. People have been going for a couple days. If you see places that aren't tracked, it's usually for a reason. So you get a new guy at a hill, and like, sweet powder. It's like you're about to go over a cliff. Like, don't go there.
I remember we were at Sunshine, I think, one time, and me and I think it was one other guy, and then this rando was like with us on the chairlift. I was like, we're gonna hit that over there. That looks insane. And it was pretty mellow. Like, I don't think there couldn't be an avalanche in that area. It was just like, it was out of bounds off to the side, and it was way off to the side. Like, no one went there because it was a hike for like, it's a hike to get back. So we go there. Yeah. End up there, and like, sure enough, like, okay, we're done. Like, well, that was a bad idea. So we start our walk back, and I'm so heavy, I'm just like popping through. The other guys are like walking on top. The rando that came with us is like, what is wrong with you guys? And just like takes off and like never saw him again. Yeah. It was miserable.
Yeah, for sure. The search for the powder, though, people will do a lot of work for some powder, man. Yeah. Like, you'll get people that will hike and they'll boot pack up things, and you get, 10 seconds of powder. But for those that have, never experienced the powder, it's another feeling, man. When you're on a snowboard or skis and it's just waist deep powder and you're floating down the side of a mountain, oh, it's awesome. It's epic.
It's the coolest thing ever.
It's what you live for, yeah.
It is. Society of Snow.
Yeah.
So what is this?
Okay. I feel like you definitely need to watch this new series on Netflix. It's not even a series. It's a movie that I had no idea this actually happened. It recounts the events of a rugby team traveling. I think it was back in the 70s, I want to say. They were traveling. There were a team from Uruguay.
Uruguay?
Right, Uruguay.
Go on, yeah.
They're going from Uruguay. They're heading from there to Chile. Going over the Andes. And as they're going over the Andes, their plane crashes. When their plane crashed, they had, obviously some people survived, and basically they clipped the top of the mountain. The plane broke in half, and the fuselage kind of rolled down the side of this mountain, and it basically stopped right in the middle of this mountain range where they're in the middle of the Andes. And they weren't dressed for the conditions. It's the middle of the winter. And it recounts their survival story. Like 10 days in, they managed to get a radio working. And they heard over the radio, there was maybe, 20-something survivors at that point. They heard over the radio that they were calling off the search for the winter because they believed that everyone was dead. Yeah. And so they're way up in the Andes. And basically this whole thing just recounts the story of what they went through and all the adversities. And
that's crazy.
I listened to a TED Talk of one of the survivors at the end.
Yeah.
And he had sort of this overwhelming calmness in his voice where it almost seemed like because of that level of adversity that he had gone through, everything in his life was simple at that point. He just was very, very relaxed. He's like, I got to live again. And I think that a lot of people almost go through life not really realizing that this is their only life.
Yeah.
Right? There's an awesome saying, and it says, every man has two lives, and the second life begins the moment he realizes he has just one. And I think it's incredibly profound to consistently remind yourself that you're going to die one day.
Yeah.
This is the only experience you have. And so you have to make the most of it every day. Don't take things too seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. And realize that this is pretty important, because time moves by very fast. All of a sudden you realize you're in your mid-30s with a bunch of kids. And like it's going by. It's not stopping. So it was a really cool documentary. I think you'd enjoy. Or it isn't a documentary, it was a movie, but based on a true story. It'd be worth watching.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out. I've been watching random crap, so I need to find something good. After shift, they talk about taking your armor off. I was talking to someone I know really well. It was in emergency services for a long time at a very high level. And he talked about, like, when you go to work, say your girl, you put your hair up, that's putting your armor on. Like, you're putting your armor on for the day. When you get home, you pop your hair out, whatever. Yeah. Your armor's off. Yeah. Have you developed anything through the years of when you come off shift? Any kind of ritual or any kind of stuff that you do?
I don't think particularly. I think that I always feel better after working out. That's almost my reset, where I get a big sweat on, and even if I've had a really rough night, I find that sweating and breathing heavy just resets me. And it's like, okay, here we go. Days off. Let's reset.
Yeah.
Right? You could have that high cortisol spike from just calls all night. And I don't know. It seems like a bit of a reset for me.
It's interesting. The one that I find it, and you'll experience this when you have kids, is like coming home and just immediately being like, daddy, 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 blah, blah. Like, it's a very interesting thing of having to, where I used to rush home from work, I'll kind of take a couple seconds, like take a couple minutes at the table, right? Reset, bullshit with the guys and the girls. And then the one guy we had at the hall the other day, Jason, he talked about, like, maybe you take the long way home, or maybe you take your time, or maybe you stop for a coffee. And it's been a very interesting shift in the last few years of not rushing home, but it's better to not rush home in a shitty state than to, it's better to take your time and reset yourself than to go home in that state, right? Because you can be home as quick as you can, but if you're being a shitty husband or dad, like, why be home quickly? The time might call for it because wife's going to work or whatever, but trying to reset and just trying to take a couple seconds for yourself, take a deep breath and reset has been kind of my go-to before I go home, which is an interesting, I don't know.
For those that aren't aware here, you live like 3 minutes from the fire hall. Yeah. I live about 35 minutes from the hall.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting when you ask me this, I probably have that built-in decompression after every shift, just inherent in my drive.
Yeah.
Right. I can listen to music. I can put a podcast on. I can, sip my coffee. And I think now that I'm reflecting on it, like, you're absolutely right. That would be my decompression. Yeah. And I don't really feel that urge to decompress when I get home because, hey, I just had it. I'm just chilling in my car.
Yeah.
Some of those drives homes are awesome. And there's been a few people that had those drives and then moved to the city here. And they said that they missed that drive.
Yeah. And I enjoy, so in the summertime, I'll ride my bike to work. And I enjoy that time, just like being outside, a little bit of exercise and just like cruising, right?
Dude, you look so content on that little bike.
On my beach cruiser.
Your beach cruiser, comfy seat.
It's so good.
Headphones in.
Yeah.
It looks like it does two things. It looks like it puts you in a good mood going to work on a sunny day.
Yeah.
And then you get that nice decompression in the morning.
Yeah. It's one of our favorite things to do, Jen and I. when we first met, like we went to, we go on trips to California quite a bit, and we'd fly into LAX and we'd stay in like Redondo area. I don't know if you know LA at all, but we'd go down to the beach. We'd rent beach cruisers, and we'd cruise like for an hour and a half to this Marina Del Rey, and it's so cool because in California, like there's that big boardwalk along the beach, and you just like you just ride it, and like you have the ocean on one side, beautiful houses on the right, like just the atmosphere and everything, and it's one of the coolest things. And like after being on beach cruises there, I was like, I want a beach cruiser for home. So it's almost like it teleports you right to that time of being like, I'm on the beach. It's like, it's relaxing.
There's no gears. You're not there sitting about what gear do I need to be in. You're just getting on and you're pedaling.
It's so funny because like Jen and I have done that probably 3 times, separate times. We go to LA and we do that cruise. And I was on a fire course in Colorado with a guy from work, TJ. And we did a layover in LA and had like the whole day there. So I was like, let's go to the beach. I took him. So something that was like romantic for me and my wife. I take a guy from work and we're just cruising. And he loved it. It was so cool. Like he's just like, this is amazing. Go have some delicious seafood. And like cruise back.
Yeah.
We had the worst sunburns after on the flight home.
I can totally picture you two biking.
Oh, we were the perfect pair in Colorado. And it was because he just likes to sleep, likes to do his own thing. I'm very introverted. Like I don't care to go out and drink at the bar and stuff. So we just like bed at 9 o'clock, bed at 9 o'clock. Hell yeah.
Both just
let's go. It was so fun, man. It was good. It was good. Yeah. We'll end on this. What's your escape? I'll leave it as broad as I want, but what's your escape?
Yeah, skiing. I think we touched on it. That's my that's my happy place.
That's your happy
when
place.
I'm stressed, I need to go out for a good ski, and I'm always in a better mood after a day skiing. Yeah. How about you?
I think it's like switching. I think it's like there's a fine line between a distraction and an escape, right? And it's I'm trying to find a better escape, and I think that's through like what we talked about with the creativity stuff, like finding that creative outlet and trying new stuff. And
would you say it's switching from gaming?
Yeah, from like video games, just like useless stuff of just like monotonous things, right?
I've always struggled with the whole video games, if it's a waste of time or if it's not a waste of time.
I think it's what you're going to do with it, right? Like, so I have a group of friends that will go on once a week, every couple of weeks kind of thing, and game together. And it's a way to kind of reconnect with those people, right? And it's like your, like your Zoom meetings to like bring it, but it's just fun, right? Because you're doing something and it's winter time. So what are you going to do otherwise? We'll have kids. It's not like we can just like ditch them and do something. So I think in that regard, it's okay. But if you're just like avoiding life because you're doing it and doing that, I think there's other stuff you can be doing, right? Yeah. And I'm excited that spring is coming, so you can get outside more and do some cool stuff and fly fish and do that stuff, and be exciting. Yeah. It'll be good. I like it. You gonna come fly fishing this year?
Hell yeah, brother.
Okay, cool. We'll lose a lot of flies together.
We will.
I'm so terrible at it. We go off the dock and where we live, and then I've been on a lake fly fishing and river fly fishing, and I love lake fly fishing so much more because it's just a lot easier, a lot less stressful, and you just do your thing. So I'll get out there and
I got all my gear. We'll get it out.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, right on.
All right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Episode 3 is in the books.